Liam stepped through the door, radiating satisfaction after his honeymoon with his assistant. He imagined a tender embrace and a warm dinner awaited him. Instead, he was met with 2 cold documents I handed him, divorce papers, and the company's bankruptcy notice. I calmly watched the smile on his face slowly freeze, until he seemed to be completely drained of all strength. And this moment, I had waited 3 years for. The entryway's motion sensor light clicked on, illuminating Liam's bronze, utterly sated face. Behind him followed Emma, his young and beautiful assistant, still wearing the tropical print maxi dress she hadn't had time to change out of. The air instantly filled with the sweet, cloying scent of sunscreen mixed with sea salt. "Honey, I'm home." Liam's voice overflowed with an almost boastful cheerfulness. He spread his arms, anticipating a passionate reunion hug. I remained still, seated in the living room's armchair, my back to him, holding a glass of chilled lemon water. He probably assumed I was sulking. After all, his so-called business trip this time had been to Hawaii, with his private assistant, for half a month. Liam changed his shoes and walked the few steps to stand before me, his tone patronizing, as if talking to a child. "What's wrong? Are you mad? I brought you a gift. Look, the latest model bag, limited edition worldwide." With that, he placed a large luxury brand box on the coffee table in front of me, making a dull thud. I raised my eyes, my gaze sweeping past the garish orange box to his face, which appeared somewhat puffy from excessive relaxation. The smile on his face, juxtaposed with Emma's uneasy demeanor behind him, formed a truly ironic scene. I didn't look at the bag. Instead, I pushed the 2 documents beside me towards him. "This," I said, my voice eerily calm, "this is your gift." The smile on Liam's face stiffened. Suspiciously, he picked up the top document. He only needed a glance at the title, Divorce Papers, F. Or his pupils to constrict sharply. "Ava, what is the meaning of this?" Liam's voice suddenly rose, tinged with offended anger. I ignored his interrogation, simply gesturing with my eyes toward the second document. He roughly snatched the paper. When the bold, black letters spelling bankruptcy notice hit his gaze, he froze. The color drained from his face at a visible rate, turning from bronze to ashen gray. "This is absolutely impossible," Liam stammered, repeating the phrase over and over like a broken record. He tried to find even a hint of a joke on my face, but he failed. My face remained like a frozen lake, completely still and unruffled. "The company, how could the company go bankrupt?" He finally managed to squeeze out a complete sentence, his voice hoarse as if scraped with sandpaper. I picked up the chilled lemon water, slowly took a sip, then calmly stated, "While you were busy having a romantic escapade in Hawaii, I had to find something to do. Like, cut my losses." "What did you do?" He lunged at me, trying to grab my wrist, to question me, to accuse me. I recoiled in disgust, sidestepping him, letting him lunge into empty air and stumble a few steps. He tore open the bankruptcy notice. Every word on it was like a small hammer, shattering his last shred of hope. Bank accounts frozen, core technical staff resigning en masse, suppliers demanding payment, tax audits initiated. He collapsed onto the carpet, his eyes vacant. Emma, who had been hiding behind him, now saw the documents on the coffee table. Her young, pretty face instantly turned pale. She instinctively retreated a step, then another, quietly inching towards the door, like a mouse preparing to flee. Liam noticed her odd behavior and, as if clutching a last straw, shrieked hysterically at her, "Emma, what are you standing there for? Call your dad. Tell him to find a solution. Hurry." Emma trembled at his shout. Far from stepping forward, she retreated even faster. "Mr. Liu, this has nothing to do with me." Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with fear and a selfish urgency to clear her name. I watched, cold-eyed, as these loving partners, who had just been entangled in paradise, now scattered at the first sign of trouble. What swelled within me wasn't the satisfaction of revenge, but a profound, desolate sadness. Liam refused to believe it. He scrambled to his feet, pulled out his phone, and with trembling fingers, dialed the chief officer, CFO. The call connected, and he roared into the receiver, "Michael, why is there no money in the company accounts? Why are the accounts frozen? Explain yourself." There was a few seconds of silence on the other end, then Michael's tired, distant voice replied, "Mr. Liu, you should just look at the documents yourself. All the accounts, Ms. Ava has had them audited by her attorney and audit team. All I can tell you now is, the company is finished." Liam wanted to say more, but the phone was hung up. He stood there, holding his phone blankly. His once spirited face now held only bewilderment and despair. At this moment, my thoughts drifted back 3 years. That too was a brightly lit evening, at the celebration gala for the successful public listing of the company we had co-founded. Liam, as the founder and CEO, stood on stage, radiating confidence, thanking everyone for their support, especially me. He said, "The person I want to thank most is my wife, Ava. Without her, there would be no company today, and no me. She is the brightest light in my life." Thunderous applause erupted from below. I watched him from the crowd, my eyes moist, feeling that all the hardships and sacrifices of the past decade had been repaid in that moment. Halfway through the banquet, I carried a champagne glass, wanting to get some air in the lounge. The lounge door was ajar. From inside came Liam's hushed voice, tinged with a drunken slur and impatience. All right, stop it, there are people outside." Immediately following, Emma's sweet, cooing voice, full of grievance and feigned innocence. "Then when are you going to tell her? Liam, you said you loved me, and that you two had no feelings left, that you were just work partners." Emma, the fresh college graduate I had personally interviewed and hired as an intern, whom I had transferred to Liam's side as an assistant because she seemed clever and diligent. My blood ran cold at that moment. "Her?" Liam sneered. "Ava? She's a workaholic, incredibly boring, like a dead fish in bed. If it weren't for the fact that she's still useful, helping me manage the company, I would have divorced her ages ago. Darling, only you make me feel like a real man." What followed were nauseating kissing sounds and the rustling of clothes. I stood outside the door, utterly cold, the champagne glass in my hand creaking as I gripped it, almost to the point of shattering. I didn't storm in. I didn't behave like a common brawler and tear into them. I just quietly stepped back, took out my phone, aimed it at the gap in the door, and pressed the record button. From that day on, my world collapsed. But I didn't cry, nor did I make a scene. Tears are the cheapest weapon, they solve nothing and only expose weakness. I began to endure, like a leopard lurking in the shadows, patiently observing my prey. Liam became unusually gentle with me, a compensatory, guilt-ridden kind of fawning. He would suddenly buy me expensive jewelry and publicly express more love for me than before. But the perfunctoriness and impatience in his eyes were like lice on clothing, impossible to hide. I smiled, accepting all his kindness, cooperating with his clumsy performance. Later, I quickly discovered he had begun to brazenly embezzle company funds. One massive business entertainment expense after another ultimately flowed to luxury boutiques, high-end restaurants, and five-star hotels. And the other end of the spending records was always linked to his assistant, Emma. They were living a life of extravagant indulgence with the hard-earned money we had built together, treating me like a fool, an ATM. The flames of anger and humiliation burned hotter and hotter within me. I secretly contacted David, my college classmate, who was now a partner at a renowned law firm. In a quiet corner of a coffee shop, I told him everything. He looked at me, his eyes full of concern and surprise. "Ava, what do you plan to do?" I gazed out at the gray sky, calmly saying, "I want him to lose everything." From that day on, the seed of revenge took root and sprouted in my heart. Every time I saw Liam and Emma exchanging flirtatious glances, every time I saw them openly doting on each other using company resources, my heart grew colder, and the fire of revenge burned brighter. I wasn't waiting for an opportunity. I was creating one. A perfect opportunity to cast him into hell. "Ava, you lunatic. You're insane." Liam finally snapped out of his shock. He pointed at me, his eyes bloodshot, like a trapped beast driven to desperation. "This is our shared effort. The empire we built together. How could you do this?" His roar echoed through the empty living room, sounding so powerless and ridiculous. I slowly stood up and walked towards him, looking down at him. "Shared effort?" I scoffed, my voice low but every word clear. "While you were busy business traveling around the world with your assistant, spending lavishly, did you ever consider whose effort this was? When you used the company's contingency fund to buy her a limited edition bag, did you ever consider whose effort this was? When you put her clueless cousin in the procurement department, raking in countless kickbacks and turning the company into utter chaos, did you ever consider whose effort this was?" With each sentence I uttered, Liam's face grew paler. He probably never imagined that everything he thought he'd hidden perfectly, I knew it all. He opened his mouth, but couldn't utter a single word in rebut. I began to recall how, step by step, I had tightened this net. 3 years ago, after that celebration gala, I outwardly remained the diligent COO, arriving at the office earliest and leaving latest every day, handling complex operational matters. Liam was content with his leisure, convinced I was naturally destined for a life of toil, a woman who couldn't live without her work. He didn't know that every night I worked late, I was laying the groundwork to dismantle his empire. The first step was equity. After the company went public, Liam, as CEO, held the most shares, giving him absolute controlling interest. I quietly began to contact the early investors. Most of them had invested based on the project proposals I'd drafted and my personal reputation, and they had grown quite critical of Liam's subsequent hubris. I arranged to grab coffee with Mr. William, who held the largest stake among them. I didn't bring up Liam's private life, that would have made me seem unprofessional. I simply pushed the company's financial reports for the past year, along with a risk assessment report I had prepared, across the table to him. Mr. William, as you can see, the company's cash flow is extremely tight, and returns on several key investments are far below expectations. Liam's recent strategic decisions, with all due respect, are overly aggressive and presumptuous. Mr. William was an old hand. As he reviewed the report, his brow furrowed deeper. I seized the moment to present my proposal. I want the company to stabilize. I am willing to acquire your shares at a price 10% above market value. You can cash out and secure your assets. I will stabilize morale and rectify the situation. He looked at my calm and determined eyes, remained silent for a long time, and finally nodded. After that, it took me 6 months to quietly buy back shares from several minor shareholders. My shareholding, which had been that of the second largest shareholder, grew to a point where I could and with him on equal footing. And he, oblivious to all of this, remained immersed in his dream of being the company's sole master. The second step was finance. At a board meeting, under the guise of strengthening internal controls and preventing financial risks, I proposed establishing a multi-level approval mechanism. All expenditures exceeding $500,000 required not only the chief officer's, CFO, signature, but also mine as COO. Liam was the first to object, viewing it as a move to undermine his authority and tie his hands. In front of all the board members, I stated calmly and firmly, Mr. Liu, this isn't targeting you, it's about establishing proper procedures. A mature publicly listed company must have robust internal control processes. This is our responsibility to everyone, to all shareholders. If you believe the CEO can freely use large sums of money without oversight, then I suggest we all reassess the company's governance risks. My arguments were sound and well-reasoned, and the board members unanimously nodded in agreement. Liam's face was livid, but he couldn't refute it, and could only watch as the proposal passed. He dismissed me as just a busybody, a meddling woman, inadvertently handing me a legitimate opportunity to monitor all his financial flows and gather evidence of his crimes. Every invoice he signed, every payment he approved, I had my assistant photocopy, back up, organize, and archive. The evidence of his extravagance with Emma, when stacked, reached 1/2 meter high. I even hired a team under the company's name to conduct a secret audit of the company's accounts for 3 months. When the detailed audit report was placed before me, clearly marking every instance of Liam's embezzlement and misappropriation, I knew the knife was sharpened. Liam had tried to fight back. He attempted to sideline me from core management, promote his own loyalists, and entrust key company operations to his people. But I had already cultivated my team within the company. Those core employees who had fought alongside me since the startup phase recognized only me, not him, the hands-off boss. Every personnel change he attempted was cleverly neutralized by me under the pretext of ensuring project stability and continuity. He was furious and helpless. He didn't know that the elaborate net, custom-made for him, had already quietly tightened. I wanted him to stand at the pinnacle of power, believing he had everything firmly under control, only for me to personally push him down. Only then would his fall be truly devastating, truly agonizing. Liam stared at the bankruptcy notice on the coffee table, a death warrant in his hands, his face shifting from green to white, then to a dark, livid green. As if a sudden realization struck him, he snatched his phone and frantically began dialing the company's board members. The first call went unanswered. The second was directly hung up. The third connected, but the person on the other end simply said coldly, Mr. Liu, there's nothing more for us to discuss, and hung up. He was utterly stunned, unable to understand why, overnight, everyone had sided with me. I watched his futile struggles and kindly offered a reminder, don't bother. While you were enjoying the sun and sand with your mistress, I had already sent a detailed report of his glorious exploits, complete with photos and documents, to every board member and major investor. I paused, savoring the crumbling expression on his face, and continued, your embezzlement of company funds, misappropriation of company assets, building up your personal slush fund, they all know about it now. Liam froze, his eyes hollow, unable to believe I could go this far, and even less able to believe that the board members, who were usually so deferential, would abandon him so resolutely. My thoughts drifted back to a month ago. That night, Liam returned home, proudly announcing that he was going on a half-month business honeymoon to Hawaii. This partner is very important. They specifically requested Emma to come along for meeting minutes. Honey, I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but when I get back, I'll give you a huge surprise. He said this while hugging me from behind, his excitement and anticipation impossible to hide. I could even smell Emma's perfume on him. I suppressed my revulsion, turned around, and forced a perfect, slightly jealous smile. Hawaii? That doesn't sound much like work. But if it's for business, of course I support you. Let finance know how much you need for travel expenses, and I'll approve it. Seeing me so understanding, he was overjoyed and kissed my cheek. That kiss was so cold it gave me goosebumps. I generously approved a 7-figure sum for his business travel expenses. This money, naturally, became another piece of ironclad evidence of his embezzlement. This was the final trap I had set for him. The moment he and Emma boarded the flight to paradise, my plan officially launched. I immediately convened my core team to stabilize morale within the company. Then, I met with David, organizing all the evidence I had collected over the past 3 years into an irrefutable dossier. The video I had recorded 3 years ago outside the Celebration Gala Lounge was placed as the very first attachment. I sent that fate-sealing email to all board members and investors. Half an hour later, my phone was bombarded with calls. The board's fury was even more intense than I had anticipated. What does a publicly listed company value most? Reputation, compliance, and the CEO's integrity. Liam's actions had undoubtedly dragged the company's reputation through the mud, treating all investors' interests as a joke. That same evening, the board held an emergency online meeting. As COO and a major shareholder, I attended the meeting and calmly presented all the facts. The result of the meeting was a unanimous vote: immediately suspend Liam from all duties and appoint me to temporarily take over the company. At the same time, to preserve the company's remaining assets and prevent them from being dragged down by Liam's personal debts, the board unanimously agreed to immediately initiate bankruptcy liquidation procedures. This decision was painful, akin to killing one's own child. But better a quick pain than a prolonged one. A company rotten to its core, a shell hollowed out by parasites, would only drag everyone down with it unless we dismantled it and rebuilt. Seeing that Liam's grand ship was about to sink, Emma's survival instinct completely erupted. She no longer looked at Liam, but quietly picked up her limited edition handbag, tiptoeing, like a thief, inching towards the door. Her intentions were so transparent that even Liam, utterly devastated, noticed. Emma, stop right there. Where are you going? Liam lunged like a mad dog, seizing her wrist tightly. Emma shrieked in terror, struggling desperately. Let go of me. Liam, you're crazy. This has nothing to do with me. She flinched, but her survival instinct ignited the greatest courage she'd ever known. She turned back to Liam, her eyes filled with venom and evasion. Mr. Liu, I'm just an assistant. You made me do everything. I knew nothing. She tried to completely distance herself, even attempting to shift all the blame onto the man she had just been intimately involved with. You're lying. Liam trembled with rage. The money, the bags I bought you, the car, the house for your parents. Do you dare say you didn't spend it? Those were gifts you willingly gave me. You pursued me. I was tricked by you. Emma cried dramatically, tears streaming down her face, as if she were the biggest victim. I stood with my arms crossed, watching them turn on each other like dogs fighting over scraps. It was quite a spectacle. Their once sworn vows of love had now devolved into naked self-interest and self-preservation. I looked disdainfully at Emma, who was still putting on a show, and slowly spoke. Do you really think you can escape this? Emma's crying stopped abruptly, and she looked at me in terror. I pulled another folder from under the coffee table and gently tapped it. I've compiled all the evidence of your involvement in embezzling company funds, fabricating expense reports, and even accepting kickbacks from suppliers. I have 3 copies. One here, one with David, and one, I paused, pleased to see all the color drain from her face, has already been anonymously submitted to the police. With a thud, Emma's legs gave out, and she collapsed to the floor, her eyes filled with despair and overwhelming resentment towards Liam. Indeed, if not for this man, she would still be a promising university graduate. How could she have fallen to this point? Liam stared at Emma in shock, then abruptly turned back to me. He finally realized that I didn't just want him to go bankrupt or divorce him. I wanted to completely destroy his life. A never-before-felt fear gripped him. He began to threaten me. Ava, don't push me. We were married, after all. Must you be so ruthless? Don't forget, I know how many secrets you have. I'll expose our past, dragging your name through the mud too. He thought he could still grasp my last weakness. He was wrong. From the moment I decided on revenge, I had already trampled all notions of reputation and honor underfoot. I simply pulled out the last few pages from that folder and tossed them in front of him. It was a pre-prepared media exposé draft detailing his chaotic private life, affairs, and even dalliances with certain disreputable starlets. It included dates, locations, photos, and bank transfer records. It was even more detailed and scandalous than the materials I had given to the board. Go ahead and try. I looked at him, saying each word distinctly. Let's see who will face the more public and devastating downfall. He stared at the draft, his pupils shrinking to pinpricks. He was completely silenced. Because he knew I wasn't bluffing. In that moment, the look in his eyes was no longer anger, no longer hatred, but pure, bone-deep terror. He finally understood that he wasn't facing the soft-hearted wife he could manipulate at will, but a vengeful spirit, crawled back from hell to claim his life. When the doorbell rang, both Liam and Emma flinched like startled rabbits. I calmly walked over and opened the door. Outside stood several uniformed officers, their expressions grave. Excuse me, are you Liam and Emma? We've received a report alleging your involvement in embezzlement and misappropriation of company funds. Please come with us to assist in the investigation. Liam's face turned completely ashen. The cold handcuffs clicked shut around the wrist that once sported a luxury watch. As he was led away, he didn't look at me again. He was like a puppet from whom the soul had been drawn, his eyes vacant and numb. Emma, however, sobbed hysterically, repeatedly shouting, "I'm innocent." The scene was as ugly as it could be. I watched it all calmly, until the police car disappeared from view, then I closed the door. The house immediately fell silent. The air still carried the scent of their panic and chaos. I walked to the window, pushed it open, and let the cold night wind blow in, sweeping away all the grime. My heart held not a ripple. It was as if the two people just taken away were complete strangers to me. Days later, the courthouse officially accepted my divorce proceedings, as well as the property division and claims for damages against Liam. The company's bankruptcy liquidation process also proceeded simultaneously. In the courthouse, Liam and I met again. After just a few days, he looked utterly haggard, his eyes sunken, completely devoid of his former vigor. The moment he saw me, a strong hatred flared in his eyes. In court, Liam attempted to equivocate, denying all accusations, even turning the tables and claiming everything was a conspiracy I had orchestrated to seize company assets. Then it was my turn to testify. I ignored his slanders, and under David's guidance, calmly presented the evidence, item by item, to the judge. Detailed financial reports, showing the anomalous flow of every sum. Bank transfer records, clearly documenting how company funds were transferred into his and Emma's personal accounts. Call records, audio files, and the video recorded at the celebration gala, where he personally admitted he was merely using me. When the video played on the large screen in the courtroom, the entire court gasped. Liam probably never dreamed that his momentary indulgence 3 years ago would become the ironclad evidence that crushed him today. Emma also testified as a cooperating witness. In exchange for a reduced sentence, she divulged more of Liam's unknown illegal activities. She cried, portraying herself as an innocent, pitiful victim, coerced and exploited by Liam. Listening to his former lover's betrayal and accusations, Liam roared curses from the defendant's table and was forcibly restrained by the bailiff. The scene was both comical and pathetic. During a recess in the trial, Liam's parents stopped me in the hallway. His mother, a rural woman who had once scrutinized me endlessly and deemed me unworthy of her truly exceptional individual son, now clutched my arm, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Ava, let Liam go. We know we were wrong. He was just confused, a momentary lapse. After all, you were married, and our shared history as a couple should count for something." She attempted to emotionally manipulate me. I coldly pulled my hand away, looked at her, and said, word for word, "Mrs. Margaret, when he betrayed me and transferred assets, why didn't he think of our shared history as a couple? The law is just. He committed a crime and he must be punished. No amount of pleading will change that." I walked past them, without looking back. The judge pronounced the verdict immediately. Liam was found guilty of duty embezzlement and me. Appropriation of public funds. Company assets would first be used to repay bank debts and supplier arrears. The remaining portion would be divided according to the marital property agreement. As the innocent party in the marriage, and the direct victim of his criminal acts, I was awarded the majority share of the company's remaining assets, as well as a substantial sum for emotional distress. As for Liam, the court deferred his sentencing, but he was facing a decade in prison. Stepping out of the courthouse, the sunlight was blinding. I looked up at the sky and let out a long, slow breath. Everything was over. Liam, once hailed by the media as a young entrepreneurial star, was now a convicted felon, condemned by all. I had already contacted several mainstream media outlets, which reported the entire sequence of events factually. In the reports, I didn't exaggerate or sensationalize, merely stating the facts objectively and attaching some desensitized evidence. Of course, the reports focused on my image as a victim who endured, awakened, and fought back. Overnight, public opinion erupted. Liam's scandal became water cooler talk. Every humiliating label, hypocritical, greedy, lecherous, traitorous, stuck to him like glue. Social ruin, sometimes, is more painful than actual death. His former business partners and fair-weather friends, who had once praised him and flocked around him, rushed to issue statements, distancing themselves from him, fearing they would be implicated. Emma, likewise, had her reputation shattered. Her photos and stories spread across the internet, earning her the label of the strongest other woman in history. She was disassociated by her alma mater's alumni network and blacklisted by the entire industry. Her life, at 25, had prematurely ended. In stark contrast to their utter chaos was my image. In the public eye, I was a victim betrayed by her husband and subordinate, yet I was calm, resilient, and intelligent in my counterattack. My social media accounts were flooded with countless comments and private messages. Many women with similar experiences found resonance and an outlet for their emotions in my comment section. They praised my courage and wisdom, calling me the pinnacle of independent womanhood and the textbook example of taking down a scoundrel. As I read those warm messages, for the first time I felt that everything I had done wasn't just for myself. I leveraged this sudden surge of public attention to launch my independent small charity project, the Her Women's Entrepreneurship Program, into the public eye. This program aimed to provide microfunding and entrepreneurial guidance to women who face difficulties in marriage or career but yearn to rise again. The announcement was met with immense response and support. Many businesses and individuals expressed willingness to donate funds or provide resources. Eventually, Liam's sentence was handed down, 10 years in prison. He appealed, but the evidence chain was complete and irrefutable. The second trial quickly dismissed the appeal, upholding the original verdict. He was sent to a prison on the outskirts of the city, beginning his long period behind bars. The divorce was finalized soon after Liam was incarcerated. When I signed my name on the last page and received the divorce certificate, I felt a lightness throughout my entire being. Legally, emotionally, I was completely free. I sold the house that had witnessed our decade of shared history, and also his betrayal. I didn't want to live in a place filled with memories, especially painful ones. With the divided assets, I bought a spacious apartment in a high-rise apartment in downtown with an expansive view. I hired the best designer to decorate it in my favorite style, minimalist, bright, and artful. I discarded all old furniture, clearing out every item associated with Liam, even books or photographs. When the moving truck drove away with the last box of old items, I stood in the empty old house and quietly said goodbye to the air. I was saying goodbye to the naive, blind Ava who had once thrown herself headlong into love. From then on, I was simply me, Ava, independent and self-reliant. Her program progressed very smoothly with support from all sectors of society. I established a dedicated foundation and assembled a professional team to screen and support genuinely promising, aspiring female entrepreneurs. My daily schedule was packed, busy, but fulfilling. I was no longer the COO centered around family and husband. I had become a helmswoman creating value and hope for more women. I started learning new skills. I enrolled in an oil painting class. Every afternoon, I would be in the studio, using colors and lines to depict the world in my heart. I started working out, Pilates, yoga, boxing. The sweat carried away the last remnants of negative emotions from my body and gave me a healthier, stronger physique. I made many new friends from various industries. They were independent, interesting, and vibrant. We talked about careers, art, and life, rarely men or marriage. David became my long-term legal advisor, and also my closest friend. We occasionally grabbed dinner together. He would tell me about the bizarre cases he was handling, and I would share heartwarming or inspiring stories from my foundation. The connections I forged were characterized by a pure appreciation and trust that transcended gender. Those directors and investors from various companies once looked at me with new respect. They witnessed my skill and resolve, and eagerly extended invitations for me to join their new projects in executive roles. I politely declined each one. I told them I no longer wished to work for anyone else, I only wanted to focus on my own ventures. My life would be defined by me, and me alone. Occasionally, I still received messages from strangers. They were all women inspired by my story. They told me my experience had given them the courage to leave unhappy marriages and the confidence to rebuild their careers. In that moment, I truly understood. My story was no longer just about personal revenge. It had become a symbol of how a woman could rise from the ruins and build her own indestructible kingdom. A few months later, I was invited to a high-profile financial forum dinner. The dinner was a gathering of prominent figures, with glasses clinking and conversations flowing. Dressed in a well-tailored white suit, I moved confidently through the crowd, champagne glass in hand, greeting familiar business partners and investors. It was then that I spotted a few familiar faces. They were Liam's old buddies, the ones who, at our company's celebration gala years ago, had clapped Liam on the back and affectionately called me sister-in-law. They saw me too. The expressions on the men's faces instantly became complex, a mix of awkwardness, surprise, and even a hint of awe. They huddled together, pointing and whispering about me. One of them, the man surnamed Zhao who had been closest to Liam back then, hesitated for a long while before finally steeling himself, glass in hand, and walking toward me. "Ms. Ava," he began cautiously, even his form of address had changed. I gave a faint nod in response. "Long time no see. You look even more elegant than before," he offered a dry compliment, unable to meet my gaze. "Thank you," I replied, polite yet distant. He took an awkward sip of his drink, then finally couldn't hold back, tentatively asking, "How's Liam doing? In prison?" Hearing this, I let out a soft laugh. There was no warmth in that smile. I looked at him and clearly stated, "Mr. Robert, I have no knowledge of Mr. Liam's affairs. After all, he and I are now nothing more than the most familiar of strangers." My demeanor clearly drew a line in the sand. In my world, Liam no longer existed. The man surnamed Zhao looked as if he had swallowed a fly. He mumbled, "Excuse me," and discreetly withdrew. I did not spare them another glance, turning and walking towards the forum's host, a highly respected entrepreneur. We had a delightful conversation, and her initiative received his high praise and attention. I could feel countless eyes on me from behind. I overheard people whispering, "That's Ava, the woman who personally sent her ex-husband to prison. Quite remarkable." More than remarkable, just look at the foundation she's built. It's flourishing and has a much broader scope than the company she and Liam once shared. I used to think she lived in Liam's shadow, but now I realize she was the true powerhouse, having kept her capabilities hidden all along. There was a time when I needed the identity of Liam's wife to gain any respect in their circles. Now, I am Ava. That name itself is my most dazzling badge of distinction. This complete separation, this respect earned purely through my own capabilities, filled me with an unprecedented sense of ease and power. My life had irrevocably turned a new page. As for those who dwelled in the past, those connected to my old pains, they were no longer relevant to me. Time is the best healer, yet also the cruelest executioner. It smoothed over my wounds, but on Liam, it carved indelible scars. 2 years swiftly passed. My foundation and personal career were both prospering. As for Liam, he received a chance for a reduced sentence due to good behavior in prison. He probably felt he'd seen a glimmer of hope, and started to become restless again. One afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. On the other end was Sophia. When she graduated from college, Liam had insisted on placing her in our company's HR department. She knew nothing, yet she drew a high salary and spent her days bossing people around. Her voice was still fresh in my memory. "Ava," her voice carried a deliberate flattery and fawning, "my brother misses you very much in prison. He asked me to pass on a message. He says he truly knows he was wrong." I remained silent, quietly listening to her performance. She vividly described Liam's miserable plight in prison, attempting to stir my sympathy with cheap sentimentality about their past. Unfortunately, she had approached the wrong person. After listening to her lengthy lament, I calmly picked up the tea from the table and took a sip. Then, I spoke calmly, "Everything he's enduring now, he brought upon himself. It's the price he's paying for his choices. Pitiful? I don't think so. not in the slightest. Silence fell on the other end of the line. I continued, tell him I won't see him, nor will I help him. And I ask that you all stop bothering me about his affairs in the future. My life has moved forward. I have no interest in looking back at a past that has long since rotted away. Without waiting for her reaction, I hung up the phone and blocked the number. My cold indifference and resolve, like a bucket of ice water, completely severed any thoughts Liam had of making a comeback, letting him sink entirely into the abyss he had dug for himself. He had to understand that some mistakes, once made, last a lifetime. In this world, there's no cure for regret. Several more years passed. My new company had become an industry leader in the cultural and creative sectors. I no longer needed to prove myself to anyone. My name alone was a hallmark of excellence. I compiled my experiences and insights from these past few years into a book titled On the Ruins, Rebuilding a Kingdom. Unexpectedly, the book became a bestseller immediately upon publication, generating immense public resonance. Many readers wrote to me, saying my story had given them the courage to face life head-on. I was invited to participate in a top national women's forum, where I delivered a speech as the keynote speaker. Standing under the spotlight, facing thousands of attentive eyes in the audience, for the first time, I candidly reflected on that painful experience. My tone held no resentment, no sorrow, the calm wisdom that comes after weathering many storms. I said, many people ask me how I emerged from such a desperate situation. Today, I want to tell you all that what truly traps a person is never the harm itself, but our obsession with that harm. Pain is the greatest teacher. It takes some things from you, but it inevitably gives you others. It taught me how to love myself, how to protect myself, and how to become a stronger, more complete version of myself. So, do not fear the ruins. For beneath every ruin lies the seed of rebirth. As long as you are willing, you can build your own unique kingdom on the ruins. As my words ended, thunderous applause erupted from the audience, lasting for a long time. Looking at those shining eyes, I knew my story had fulfilled its mission. I remained single, but I cherished this state of freedom and independence. My life was rich and vibrant. I no longer needed to seek so-called security and validation from another person. I knew there would be no more darkness in my life. My future was bright. Thank you for watching today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share it with your friends. We look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Feel free to share your perspectives, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more exciting stories. See you next time.